And a very good evening to you, and welcome to today's edition of Politics 101. And it's a Tuesday evening. Tonight we're going to have Dr. Vincent Adams with us. We have been missing him for the past couple of weeks. I know we're accustomed to having him on Friday night, but we have some scheduling conflicts this week, and so we're having Dr. Adams here tonight. So please share the link and let everyone know that Politics 101 is on. Politics 101 is on. Please share the link. Good evening to all of you, whether you're joining us from in Guyana or outside of Guyana. Welcome to Politics 101. Last night, we had extensive discussion, 2 hours, on the teachers' victory in the courts. And of course, we had on the lawyer, Roysdale Ford, last night, Coretta McDonald, the General Secretary of the Teachers Union, and Lincoln Lewis, the General Secretary of the TUC. And quite a discussion. I'd like to thank them and to thank you all for staying with us right through the 2 hours last night. Very important case, very important development. So welcome. Welcome if you're joining us from Europe, good night. If you're joining us from the West Coast of the United States, good afternoon. And for the rest of you, it's in order to say good evening, and welcome to Politics 101. As we said, please share the link and let everyone know that we are here. We are here. Dr. Vincent Adams is going to be with us shortly as you gather.
You know, people ask me all the time, why do you do this? Why do you not retire and read books and write fancy academic papers? And I say, yes, that is also important. But what is more important is that I was given an opportunity to read books in the first place, to engage with ideas because of the sacrifices of ordinary people. And so part of scholarship must be given back to the people in the form of public engagement. See myself as a public scholar, what we call an activist scholar or a scholar activist, who's always trying to use the knowledge that is gained from reading books, from observing people in their communities, in their society, and giving them back, in the words of a UC Guyana, giving them back to the people as a political nourishment and by extension, cultural nourishment. That's what I'm about. It's about being that public scholar whose work is not just confined to the classroom, but that classroom is extended to the public space. I'm David Adams.
Please help keep Politics 101 on social media and broadcast television. If you are in North America, please donate via Cash App or PayPal.
If you are in Guyana and the Caribbean and don't have access to Cash App and PayPal, email your pledge to dhines6106@aol.com and we will direct you how to get your donation to us. Thank you in advance for your donation.
Mr. Watt, he is armed himself. Shots. Shots. Watch it. Tear gas. Live rounds. Also, I can see that.
Justice for Quindon! The man is a boxer, man. Watch your hand put in the boxer, man, to do that.
But since my cousin there, no, you come on the East Coast.
You listen to me.
Right? No, you come on the East Coast.
You listen to me now.
You gotta listen to me too, man.
I am listening to
Right? Now, I see you on the East Coast. The day when they get a protest of them, the next day, that's when you see one bigger heads come up to talk to my family. Right? And that's bad. If we didn't do a protest, we want to see nobody for justice. You see? I'm not holding back nothing. I'm not holding back nothing. I just need justice of my family.
Yes, I'm taking you a little bit back in time there to remind you of our Guyana, remind you of our Guyana, two Guyanas that we live in, and we can't help but emphasizing that. We're not lying on the government, we're laying it bare. And of course, the ears and the eyes of the world are now on Guyana on most issues. On most issues, we still have some way to go, but I think we have managed to get the world to realize that Guyana is not just plenty oil and potential wealth. Guyana is also plenty horrors, plenty human rights violations, plenty corruption, plenty bad governance. So it's plenty oil, plenty human rights violations, plenty bad governance, plenty disrespect for the rule of law. And we want the world to know that. Not because we want the world to punish us Guyanese, but we want the world not to stand in our way as we seek to make things right in our country. I'm not a person who believes in external intervention. I do not believe in regime change. What I ask foreign forces to do is do not stand in the way of our people's quest for equality, justice, and freedom. Not asking them to fight for us, but we recognize that foreign forces are a part of our everyday politics. It has been so from the time they invented that project, that slavery project, right through indentureship. The foreign forces have always been in our country and have always had a say. It makes those of us who are nationalists, it makes us uncomfortable. But the fact of the matter is that that is the truth. And while we ought not to be asking the foreign forces to change the government for us, we nevertheless are in order to draw their attention to what is wrong with our country, and why they should not stand in the way of us cleaning up our country. Every foreign force has a right to decide which local force it is going to support. That's their business. That is the way of the world. However, they also have a right not to stand in our way to self-determination. And that is why we've been taking our case to the world. This past week, it was in Geneva, and every time we've gone on the world stage, the government has been found wanting. And they've been found wanting not because of some little mistake. It is because of their very attitude to governance. They don't care. Unaccustomed to being subject to the rebuke of its own people. Over time, it thumbs its nose at even those who helped to put them in power, including the supporters who voted for them and the external forces who thought, and maybe some of them do still think, that the PPP better serves their interests. All I say is that we are going to continue to make our case to those external forces, that all is not well, and ultimately we will have to clean our country up. And all we're asking is do not stand in the way of that. All we're asking is do not engage in any more regime change. All we're asking is help to fix the problems that your actions in the recent past may have emboldened the government to do. All governments, or third world governments, are always mindful of what big countries think. That's a rule. All third world governments, even big governments which are not third world. But our government is closer to the Israeli government. The Israeli government is thumbing its nose at its biggest supporter, the United States. The United States is begging it to have a ceasefire. And they say no. The United States has called for a ceasefire in Guyana. It has called for inclusive governance. It has called for democratic distribution of the resources. Like the government in Israel, the Guyana government is thumbing its nose at the United States and others. There's a parallel with the two. And I'm going to develop that tomorrow. I'm going to develop that thesis tomorrow. The Guyana government is no different from the Israeli government. We, the opposition, we, the majority of the people of Guyana, we are the Palestinians. We are the ones who are being beaten, whose homes are being bulldozed, who are being spat upon, whose children are being killed. We are the Palestinians in Guyana. And our government is behaving like the Israeli government. They say that we are running propaganda against them. It's not propaganda. It's laying out the truth. Let me bring in my guest. Don't keep him waiting much longer. Dr. Adams, good evening.
Hey, good evening. Good evening, Dr. Hines. How are you doing? I'm glad to be back. I missed you and your wonderful audience, so I'm glad to be back finally.
And it's always a pleasure to have you back and to have you share your perspective on what's happening in our country, Guyana. I just was making the comparison with the way in which our government is behaving, and the way the Israeli government itself has been behaving, in the way in which there is no respect for the rule of law, there is no respect for public opinions inside of the country, there's no respect for the political opposition, and there's no respect even for the superpower that is supporting them. Although the situations are obviously different, Dr. Adams, do you think the comparison is worth making?
Oh, without question. As a matter of fact, I have made that comparison myself. Probably not giving it the kind of in-depth thought or thinking that you may have given it, but just on the surface alone, I mean, you don't have to look too far to get too deep. In the case of Israel, we know for a fact that the president and the vice president of the United States and others in the administration, the secretary has been traveling to the Middle East very often to try to convince the Secretary of State, I meant, to try to convince Netanyahu to call to have a ceasefire. And the guy, well, because of his political insecurity And this is the only reason why he's surviving, to be honest, in my opinion, is because of this war, to keep him into power. Because he knows as soon as this, I don't even call it, I'm sorry, I wouldn't even call it a war. How could you have a big, powerful nuclear nation as Israel fighting against Hamas? A little, just I normally call them an organization, more or less, and you're going to call it a war. It's not a war. This here is totally one-sided, and the genocide of I think it's up to like 30,000 human beings. I think 12 or 15,000 of those are kids. So when I hear people talk about a war between Hamas, they don't even say the Palestinians. This is not a war between Hamas and Israel. This is a war between Israel and the Palestinian people. 30,000 Palestinian people. What did they do to Israel? Now we all know that the upper echelons of Hamas and those guys, they without question, what they did on when was it, June the 4th, should not have been done. We all know that. Nobody condones it. But you can't tell me you're gonna go kill 30,000 in this 30,000 innocent residents, poor innocent residents, starving them of food and shelter. And I mean, this here is, we talk about and Israel of all countries, they should have been the least or the last to be expected to do something like this, just from their background with their Holocaust. And now here you are, it's having a genocide, and some people even comparing it to the Holocaust, because it's an extermination of the Palestinian people. Don't let us talk about Hamas. And I think that's where their sickness is coming from. This is not a war between Hamas and the Israeli government. It is between Israel and the Palestinians. And it's not even a war. It's the genocide of Israel against the Palestinian people. Hamas may have, I don't know how many hundreds of in their leadership, but if they've done something wrong, we all agree that they've done something wrong. Why would you punish over 30,000 and counting? As a matter of fact, it's not even punishment. It's a genocide, an extermination. It would appear to everybody that the intent is to exterminate that entire Palestinian population. That seems to be the end point. But you're absolutely correct. They're ignoring the United States, even though the United States is to me right now probably their only big supporter in the world. But they don't care. Same thing with Guyana. Guyana doesn't care, because they believe that now that they've got oil and they're big and powerful and they're mighty, because everybody keep running to them now to get part of the action. They believe that they've got unlimited powers. Look, I mean, you can even go further than the United States. Let's go to the United Nations Human Rights Committee. Look how they treated those people with disdain. Go before them with disrespect. The highest body of throughout the entire world in terms of making institution, the highest institution in the entire world. And look how they treated them. So it's just arrogance and high and mighty behavior that Guyana is. So Guyana is doing the same thing because of the oil that they believe that is, I guess they just believe that now they've become the country in the world, and it's flying to their head. They're power drunk. But there's going to be a price to pay. Don't worry, this cannot continue, and there will be a price to pay.
There will be a price to pay. Of course, we do not have 30,000 people dead, but we have other dead to count, from Orrin Boston to Quindon Bacchus to Mr. Headley on the East Bank, to all those young people who are dying every day because of the neglect of the country, those people whose homes have been razed, they are the victims of the assault by the government, which is prepared, like the Israeli government, to use the power of the state against its own people. Just as the Israelis are exterminating the Palestinians by saying they are fighting against Hamas. Look at Guyana. Look at Guyana. They're picking out the PADA G. They're picking out the PNC. They're picking out the AFC. They're picking out the WPA. They are picking out the organizations that they say that they are fighting against. And in the process of fighting to exterminate those organizations, because remember they say we will never see power again, not for another 40 years, which means that they intend to exterminate those organizations. And in the name of exterminating those organizations, you are invariably exterminating the people who support those organizations. Look at what you are doing with Black labor. You're underpaying Black labor, because you're underpaying grossly the public servants' labor. You're underpaying poor people labor, period. But you're especially underpaying the labor of public service workers. And when you underpay their labor, it means that their buying power in the marketplace is severely weakened. It means that they do not have any leftover income to invest so that they can create wealth. So they are constantly reproducing poverty. Those who depend on the rate and the pay of the government to its workers, they're condemned to recurring poverty because what they earn does not allow them to feed, house, and clothe themselves, and then have a little small piece to put in the bank that they probably can invest in a business so that they can create wealth. So the Black working class is doomed under the policies of this government to become a Black underclass. And the outcome is that the Black masses, through the very policies of this government, are going to be reduced to second and third class citizens in Guyana again. It's therefore, you wonder when you see some of our brothers and sisters lionizing the president in Brooklyn and so on, and you look at these people and you wonder, are these people for real? Now, I'm one of the persons who don't feel that we ought to tell Black people to support politically. If they want to support the PPP, that's their business, that's their right, and I will support their right to do so. But when I see Black people making themselves royal fools, genuflecting to a man who is leading a government that is assaulting their own people in Guyana, who not only the government, but people now in high places, the United Nations, are saying that you are brutalizing Black people. And then you see Black people in Brooklyn behaving in such a way, you wonder sometimes whether some of us have our heads in the right places. Dr. Adams.
Well, you touch on a couple of things. I'm glad you brought it up, because it's another clear indication and evidence that this government has no interest in protecting, first of all, the rights of the poor. And I have spoken about it and even written about it several times. It was even in the newspapers. I don't know if the Guyanese people know, or most of them don't know, that the Guyanese folks, which are the poor people who are doing the lower level jobs on these drill ships, these oil ships, they're working for wages several times less than their counterparts coming from other countries, coming from even Trinidad or other countries in the Caribbean. They were, and this here, I'm not making this stuff or exaggerating, Dr. Hines, because it was headlines in our local newspapers. These folks had to wait until those everybody else were finished eating before they can even eat. So they were eating the leftovers from when everybody else eat. When they leave to go offshore, they didn't have insurance. They didn't have so and even GAU, Dr. Hines, GAU, because I think GAU is their union or was wanting to be their union. Even GAU was complaining about it. So this is not stuff that I am making up or the newspaper isn't making up. GAU protested it, and GAU was the last that I heard about it. And then it suddenly went silent. The last that I heard about it was GAU was going to be meeting with the Minister of Labor. So there is no question that this government has absolutely no interest in the poor as long as they can fill the pockets of the rich. I listened to the and just to verify that, I listened to the Attorney General Nandalal in an interview, and all that he talked about was if a company is coming in here to invest, they have to have certain things that any prudent government would have. And then he said they have to be sure and confident that the government will protect them and their investment. He didn't say anything about protecting his own people, who he works for. All he talked about was protecting the companies, which is exactly what we're seeing in this arrangement here with Texan. So, I totally agree with you, Dr. Hines. That's what we see, and that's what we get. Hello, I think I missed you there.
Sorry, I removed myself from the screen. Yes, you make a very important point there, Doc, in the sense that foreign companies are coming into the Guyana all the time, and the government is bending over backwards to ensure them that their interests will be protected. That is standard in most countries that go in that direction. Foreign direct investment, you want to give them friendly conditions and to woo them. In the old days, Arthur Lewis used to call it industrialization by invitation and so on. But Arthur Lewis never talked about prostrating yourself before these foreign companies. That even as you try to ensure that they have the best conditions and they get the best deal that you can offer, you also have to balance that by ensuring that your people get the best deal, that your people are protected, they're protected, the environment is protected so that you protect their health. The labor laws are protected so you protect the right of your workers to earn a living wage. You want to make sure that you strike the balance. And if you look at the countries around the world that have struck that balance, and we usually look to the Scandinavian countries, Sweden and Denmark and those countries, which tend to come down somewhere in the middle, the balancing of human rights and the balancing of human dignity with foreign investment and local investment. Those countries tend to do well in the index, the human development index, and so on and so forth. And so what you're asking for and what all of us are asking for is a balance. But you have to wonder whether the fact that this government is so determined, it's going to court to appeal the ruling of its own court, which says that you have to have money from the parent company for insurance. You're not going to court to appeal a ruling by your judge that says workers have a right to strike, and when workers would have exhausted all avenues and they go on strike, that strike is a legitimate strike, and they're not subject to no pay, no work, no pay. And you are saying that the judge is inviting chaos, the judge is inviting instability, the judge is inviting all kinds of lawlessness to this country, and you're prepared to go and appeal that. You're prepared to go and fight your own teachers. You're going to fight your own court, which come down on the side of teachers. And you are wondering whether this intensity to keep the labor of African Guyanese, for the most part, cheap, whether that in effect is not a wing to the foreign investors, that if you come to Guyana, labor is going to be cheap. All you have to do, we are going to provide cheap labor for you. You have black people working in the public service. You're not paying them a living wage. Some of them are going to drop out of the public service, and they're going to go and start doing their own thing. They're going to become part of the non-working poor. They're going to become hustlers, and then foreign companies come in, and you say, oh, look, there is a big army of workers. They're ready. They're untrained. They are cheap labor because you keep the labor cheap. And so your foreign companies come in, you're saying to them, we are preparing the field for you. Dr. Vincent Adams.
Oh, yeah, and I don't think there's much. I think you were very, very clear. That's exactly what's happening, and which ties into what I said about our workers, with the at the lower level work, the labor type work on the ships. That's exactly how they're treating. They have no interest in them. So it's and of course we know which part of the population, which race predominantly belongs to that category. Now, and I guess I missed the part. I didn't go into the part with the president visiting in Brooklyn. I saw, and I don't know if you saw a Facebook post from a video post from our sister Simone Brooms. But that was pretty telling. Here, well, of course, the president, I'm like you, I people could support who they want, etc. And I think, that's the freedom. But here it is, here in this business. So one guy got into the restaurant apparently, and he saw the president clapping roti with his bare hands, without tape. The way that those places, you have a license for cleanliness and sanitary conditions. So the president walks in, and he was clapping the roti with his hands and then putting the roti to be sold. So a customer walks in and saw this type of stuff and started asking questions. Am I in the wrong place or something? Because, he was a regular customer. Well, the guy said, I don't care what you say. And it's that black-faced woman who was on Facebook. That's what he was referring to Simone Brooms as, who's causing this problem. And by the way, I don't care whether she or anybody says anything, because since the president have been here, I've already gotten 3 or 4 new big orders. So you see, it's here again. Is this mentality is all about the money? Every day you turn around, it has to do with the money, not about the people who need the money, that you're supposed to be providing the money and the comfort for those people. Those are the people who suffer, because that was his mentality. And so it falls in line with exactly what we're talking about here. The have-nots will continue not having anything, and that's the I wouldn't call it a policy, because they never put it in a policy, but in reality, that's what we're seeing.
And the thing goes both ways, Dr. Adams, and I want you to comment on it. On the one hand, there is a cadre of African Guyanese, and I suppose a cadre of Indian Guyanese and others, whose sole objective is money, hustle, get rich quick, and so forth. And they adopt a purely individualistic approach to life. Whereas you and I have grown up in the African community, you have experience of the Indo-Guyanese community, and you know there's always been a balance between the individualist instinct and the communalistic instinct, the community instinct. It takes a village to raise a child. There are those instincts there. There is the individual instinct. There is the community instinct. We are, all of us grew up in villages, and Christianborg, for all intents and purposes, was and still is a village. You know, that there was always the individual shopkeeper, but there was always that shopkeeper would belong to a co-op, would belong to the lodge. When it's time to do reaping of crops, if they're planting, you know, the entire family and the neighbors would go. So there was always the individual instinct in which people engage in individual entrepreneurship, the shopkeeper, etc., etc. But there was also the communal instinct, and the two existed side by side. But what we are seeing now is a cadre that is developing that is purely individualistic in its outlook, and then you have a government which recognizes that there is not a balancing effect in the Black community with that individualistic approach. They are not helping, as the government should do, to develop and sharpen the community instinct, the communal instinct. Instead, what they're doing is they're encouraging that individualistic instinct in the African Guyanese community, while in the Indo-Guyanese community, they are discouraging it. You see what that man said, that if you don't buy a dog from the party, you ain't getting no cash grant. In a sense, here is the representative of the ruling party whipping the people in line in the Indian Guyanese community. But in the Black community, the government is whipping Black people out of line and turning us against each other. And so I say, yes, there is that individualistic instinct, that purely individualistic instinct that has raised its head in the Black community, but also the deliberate attitude of the government in weakening the communal instinct, the communal moorings, and encouraging that kind of hustling, which I'm calling a kind of hustling individualism, which I think ultimately is a crime against the African Guyanese community, especially since you are not doing the same thing in the Indo-Guyanese community. Dr. Adams.
And you know, the one thing that I'm very thankful for, and I'm sure you came from a similar background like myself, it's the kind of community that we grew up in. We were poor, but we didn't even know that we were poor. You know, because of that communal type of instincts that we had, we grew up not knowing, you know, there wasn't anybody with big houses, you know, the extravagant houses, motor cars and all these type of stuff. The people that we knew, they, like you said, it took a village. These were real villages that raised us. Your parentage did not stop at your door when you left your house. Everybody in the village looked out for you. You had certain basic principles. You had to go to church, and so you learned everything that was good. You know, so instincts were good things. So we never craved or had any greed for money. Heck, you know, I remember you going to school. You know, even if your parents got to wash your shirt every day, or your pants get a little tear, the patch it, you remember them patch they used to put on. So we were happy. We didn't know that we were rich, that we were rich in terms of love and you know, and the values of life. But we did not know that we were poor. So that's the big difference. So we never look forward to this big greediness that is being inculcated now into our culture, and especially in the Black community, so to speak, and you know, they're being enticed. And that's, but then you go up into the leadership, which is the disappointing part, because remember, the majority of the population, especially in the Black community that are poverty stricken, they're looking and see the few who are doing things to get rich, and then they aspire to be like them, but the only way you can be like them is to do like them. So a lot of our of folks in that poor community, for the most part, they would just, like we say, hang him out with a soup drop and get rid of all your principles, even if it got to do whatever it takes to get a life. And when the others see that, then they aspire to do it also. But I guess it's a I guess it's a generational type thing too, in terms of when we grow up compared to what is happening now in terms of a more materialistic society. So you would do anything to get those material things, because in our time, people look up to you when you had a good education, for example. When you're bright boy in school, everybody respects that. When you're a teacher, if you could become just a teacher that we regard, the entire community respect. If you could become a policeman, you're respected. But nowadays, you're respected based upon the sneakers you wear, your whatever else you adorn yourself with, your gold and diamonds and stuff. So it's a total change in values that are driving that. But you do not have the leadership in government to try to change that direction. Like you said, in some, this is not in, I'm sure it's happening in other countries, but in all the prosperous countries, their values are more well defined in terms of where it should be, in terms of the moralities of the nation, and that's the way they raise folks. But when you have a government like this who doesn't care, and again, I want to get back to how important teachers are, Dr. Hines. Teachers are the ones who spend almost more time than their parents, and they're the ones who have the opportunity to teach those kids the values. And now when you show that there's no respect, and that is why in our time, how teachers used to be respected. But now, when you treat the teachers the way that this government is teaching the teachers, who are the ones who are going to build society because of these values, social and otherwise. It's not about math and science and English, and it's about that other parts of your human nature, of what is even more essential. The teachers are the one who frame that in you, and who develop that culture and foundation for you to become successful. So when you treat your teachers like that, you're not only breaking down the teachers and discouraging them from getting into teaching, but you're also destroying the foundation of the country, the building block of your country. And that is what this government does not understand. You're destroying the building block of your country. And now the things you can afford it to invest. You talk about investment. This here is where you ought to be looking at your number one investment to develop that society of the future generation. Guyana, 50% of Guyana population, well, it's 48%, is below the age of 26, Dr. Hines. That's what you got to develop.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
but they do not have that visionary thinking or anything that makes sense. It's all about money. As long as they can get their friends and family and favorites rich, and they can be within that community and clique, they don't care a damn. And we see, we're not making this stuff up. We're getting the evidence. We went through a whole bunch of them here a little while ago. They don't care, and the teachers are the most striking. Well, no pun intended, but so that's the way that I see it, Dr. Hines.
That's the way you see it. And of course, there are lots of calls in the Brooklyn area for a boycott of those businesses that, in a sense, coddled the president when he was there. I would leave that for the people of Brooklyn to decide. I am very careful when you're talking about people's livelihood. I know those people, those little stores, they depend on their sales for their livelihood, and I wouldn't want to use this platform without knowing all the evidence to put my support behind a boycott of those small businesses. People err, and sometimes there are various ways of rebuking them without going to the ultimate. But like I said, I'm not on the ground there in Brooklyn, so I don't have a keen sense. I would depend on the brothers and sisters there in Brooklyn to make that determination. But clearly, the behavior of some of our brothers and sisters there the other day was shocking. It is not the welcome that the president gets. You have every right to welcome your president. He's officially and legally your president. You have every right to do that. But a president that is overseeing a government that the United Nations and the rest of the world is saying you're not doing right by black people. Here you are in the heart of black Guyanese America. You are there because that's what Brooklyn is. You're in the heart of African Guyanese America, and you are not rebuking him. You welcome him, but say you welcome here, but we got some things that we want you to deal with here, not coddle him and not try to shout people down who are trying to raise these matters with him. I think it was totally out of order, and it was not our best showing as an African people, as poor people, and as Guyanese. Miranda is asking here, if why do we feel we speak for all black people? I do not speak for any black people. No black people have appointed me to speak for them. What I do speak on behalf of and speak in defense of is blackness and black dignity. I want you to get that in your head, Miranda, and people like you. I do not speak for black people. Black people are not robots that people have to speak for them. They can speak for themselves, right? But what we do speak in defense of is black dignity. And I've earned the right to do that. I've earned the right to do that, to speak on behalf of black dignity and speak in pursuant of black consciousness. That's what we are about. And I have a right as the son of black people to speak for black dignity, because had it not been for black dignity, had it not been for black power, had it not been for everything that is good about black people, I would not have had this voice that I have here tonight and Dr. Adams have here tonight. So don't tell us about who black people we talk to. Even if I were speaking for black people, you wouldn't be one of them that I would speak for. You would be left by the wayside. And those who behave nasty in Brooklyn wouldn't be the ones that I would speak for. Even if I'd assume that I could speak for black people, there's some black people who I would never speak for. So I just want you to get that right. You're not speaking here to fools. You're speaking here to people who have walked the walk, who have done the right things, and who, as we say in our community, we got little brightness. So don't come with those simplistic, stupid arguments about who speak for black people and who don't speak for black people. As I said, even if I arrogated unto myself to speak for black people, your type would not be the type of black people who I would speak for. Get that, put that in your pipe, and you know what to do with it. Doctor,
Let me, it's obvious that, and I don't know the person's name, Miranda, I think, or whatever her name is.
Yes.
It's obvious that it's obvious that well, it's obvious that she. Well, okay. Well, that tells it all. First of all, you're absolutely correct. We're not speaking for black people. What we're speaking for, Dr. Hines, which is, and I can see why she's so defensive. We're speaking for fairness.
That's right.
Equal treatment of people. This is not about black people, because if had Indians been on the same thing that happened to the Indians, if they were the shoe was on the other foot, I would have been. But by the way, my mother is Indian again. Let me keep reminding folks.
Yeah.
Okay. and all my Indian cousins, we love each other just as how my black side of me, we love each other. All we were asking for, let her dispute the evidence that we've brought forward to show the disparity in treatment. It so happens that the black side of the population, they're the ones who are suffering or bearing the brunt of the inequity or the inequality of treatment. That's all we're talking about. We're not talking about black people or speaking for black people. And you're right. Black folks can speak for themselves. What we're talking about is equality and inclusion in the wealth, inclusiveness in the wealth of the people. And it's not only us. She's saying that the United Nations Human Rights Committee is somehow also speaking for black folks when they say, when they themselves have identified the non-inclusiveness and inequality of how people are being treated. Look, I mean, Nigel Hughes has done a study, and I don't see a whole lot of people disputing it, that shows, for example, 90% of all of the contracts, the big goes to, guess what? One segment of the population, one race. Dispute the facts or the issues rather than making this thing again into race. This is not about race. This is about the facts that exist, except that the issues affect one race, and we bring it to the attention. So I would advise that well, I was about to say I would advise that she listen, but based on who you're telling me she is, it's obvious that they don't do anything. Listening or is not part of their modus operandi.
Listening is not part of their modus operandi. If you are joining us a little bit late, yes, you're on to Politics 101. I'm here with Dr. Vincent Adams, and we are talking through the issues of our day, the issues of our time, and we're setting the record straight in some regards. I do not mind people from the PPP coming on to this program. There's so many of them from high places, and I'm glad that they're on so that they can learn, because among other things, we're teachers. We can't help but being teachers. Life has put us on that path, and I welcome people from the other side to join us. But please do not come here and insult our intelligence. We do not speak for black people any differently from Irfan Ali and Jack Dio, not speaking for Indian people, but they look after Indian interests. They use the state to pursue Indian interests. Whether those interests are elite Indian interests and to some extent working class interests, they use the state to pursue Indian interests. Do not deny me the right to use whatever little agency I have to pursue and to defend African Guyanese interests. If in the process of doing so, we can liberate 1 or 2 African Guyanese per day, to recognize this moment that we are in, that it calls for sanity, it calls for sober thought, and it calls for consciousness. I am not about socializing black people to be bad people. Sorry. I'm about helping to socialize black people to be citizens of this country and to recognize that they have a stake in this country beyond a couple $1,000 somebody fling in front of their faces. Whatever else happened to our people on that plantation, when they walk through those gates, they walk through there with their dignity. I keep saying that over and over again. It is that dignity that made them within months pool their resources to go and buy large swaths of land, and then to turn those lands into communities, what we call villages, and they construct those villages in their own image. Their church, their school, their economy, their political system that they call the village system, the economy, what we call the village economy, the birth of the agricultural economy, the modern agricultural economy started in those villages. And they had to have come out with dignity, common sense, and vision in order to do that. And in 2024, I am not going to stand idly while Black people sell that vision and that dignity for a few pennies. Because when you go before the modern day master and you bow down and close your eyes, he puts $1 million in your hand. And when you close your eye again to say thanks, he put 500 million in your brother, your East Indian brother, sister, and you never see it yet. And you run away. Oh, $1 million, $1 million. And you don't know what is happening. That is why you have people like Dr. Adams. That is why you have people like all of us who have put our lives on the line, because they would rather see us dead than to do what we are doing, and to stand in between our people and injustice. That's what we are fighting against.
Let me just add. It's this whole thing about speaking for Black people and who speak for Black people seems to be the new talking point and tactic of these folks. Take a typical example, probably the best example. They've used the same words for Ipadaji.
Mm-hmm.
Ipadaji can't speak for, you guys, you can't speak for all Black people. So if they're going to say that about Ipadaji, which was essentially set up, within that framework, I mean, so that's, if they can say that about Ipadaji, what would they say about the two of us, Dr. Hines? So this here is the talking point. That's the talking point.
That's the talking point. And of course, we are going to fight back against it, as we are wont to do. When the people from the village where I was born decided that enough was enough, they put their bodies on the line, not just the figurative line, but the actual train line. And they dared them to crush their bodies. Better sense prevailed. They stopped. And they marched the governor down to the backland. In all courtesy, I understand he was accompanied by the drums and the boomba band. And they showed him what was happening in the backland. They showed him the conditions in the village. That's the tradition from which all of us come. Every village stopped the train at some point. The one in Buxton was demonstrated in a peculiar way. It was demonstrated, but in every village you stop the train, because in every village you rebuke the rulers of the colonial times who did not want to treat people as citizens. As I said, our mantra here is this: poor people of all races are seeing hell in Guyana. Just go to the market. And when you go to the market and you look at the prices in the market, something is wrong. You don't have the money to buy what's being sold there. Every race, the people of every race, especially the working people, the working poor, suffer. But African people, because of where they're located in the economy, they are wage earners working for the government. The cheapest paymaster in Guyana is the government. And the institution that is receiving the most money is the government. The government can $1.14 trillion. They can wave in front of us and say, look, we're spending. And yet, they are the worst paymasters. They don't want to pay their workers. They rather go to court and appeal their own court against their own court. This is not the Privy Council. This is not the Privy Council that says that the workers ask for bread and you give them you know what. It is your own court, and you are appealing your court that is talking about the dignity of the worker. Shame on you. Shame on you. Your own court that says the health of your people will be so much devastated if there is a spill that you have to have the parent company giving a guarantee, and you are appealing against your own court. You all know that I don't get on the oil and gas bandwagon and so on. Not that I think people are wrong, but I think people are fighting that fight for a better contract and better conditions. I fight in the fight for the money that we get in, that we share it right. And I think when both sides win, we all win. But when it comes to your court saying, protect your environment, and you are taking your own court to court, you are taking your own court to court, shame. And to those in Brooklyn who are cuddling the chief bottle washer of that, you all ought to be ashamed of yourself. And all I would say for now is what old people say, bag your face. Bag your face, those of you. It's not that you all don't know. You have social media, you all know what's happening in Guyana. But you get 4 orders. You get 4 orders. You know how many orders your brothers and your sisters just across the county line is getting? You get 4 orders. Black people, know thyself. Know thyself. Brother Adams, what's happening in the oil and gas?
Well, let me add something there that you brought up. Again, getting back to this person who was saying, well, this here is about Indians and blacks, because that's where she was going with that. Let me tell her this whole thing about a spill. If a spill if a spill happens, it's gonna wipe out fishing. Okay? And guess who predominantly fish in for Guyana? It's Indians. So when we talk about, when we're fighting for a cause, it has nothing to do with race. It's what is right for the country. And it so happens that in some cases it affects black folks more. In some cases it affects Indian folks more. In this particular case, the first set of people who are going to be affected are the fisher folks.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, they're already being affected with some of the things that the coalition had in the permits, and that they've removed, such as dumping of produced water with all of this oil and hot water and toxicity. We've seen the evidence. I'm not, I do not have scientific data to prove it, but we're seeing it. Most folks do not believe it's just a coincidence that the fishing industry and the fisher folks are getting out of the business, and most of them are Indians. And that's what that spill would, the first set of people that would affect are those. So we're not speaking for black people in that instance. You can say that we're speaking for the Indian folks. The entire quarantine that is predominantly Indian, they would be affected, with their livelihoods and everything else, that their health, just breathing it in, the fumes from the spills, etc. It could even go up the river. So we're not, the oil and gas in a spill is not going to differentiate between black and Indians. So it's a stupid comment for you to be making when we are making these issues something that we're educating the folks to let them understand the risk and how it's affecting them. It's a foolish comment, or just a just a biased comment for you to be making those statements when we're discussing what is best for the country. And it's, in some cases, the impacts would be against or for the blacks. In some cases, the impacts would be against the Indians. So stop that foolish, the nonsense. Stop spouting ignorance.
And you know, the point you're making there is so much on point, that fisher folk would be the first group of people who are going to be affected by an oil spill. But the government, as it is doing to black people, it think black people like small money. It think Indian people, you can do them whatever you want to them, and then you care a little biggish money and give them. So you're going to destroy their livelihood, but then you go into them and say, look at $500,000 cash grant, right? Yep. And that's the way they see all of us, including their own supporters. They see Indian people in a certain derogatory way. They see black people in a certain derogatory way. They line it up to make it look as though they see Indian people better than they see black people. The outcome is the same as we say poor people of all races are suffering under this regime. But the way in which the African suffering is manifesting itself is in a serious way, because African people have nowhere else to go. They're wage earners. They're wage earners for the most part, and they're earning their wage from a government that is prepared to fight them at all costs. And so in that sense, their condition is peculiar. But as Vincent just said, the fisher folk will be first affected by an oil spill. But in the government head, they feel that when fisher folk get affected, you can go to them and say, we give them black people 40,000 last week. Here what we're going to do. We're going to give you $1 million. And that's how they are prepared to govern. A wicked, clientelistic form of governance that is going to consume all of us. Eventually will consume all of us. Dr. Adams, what's happening in the oil and gas front?
Well, we had some really good news here. When was it? Yesterday or today? The petroleum department at the University of Ghana has obtained its first accreditation. But you would never believe that the coalition was the one that created that department. As a matter of fact, it was under Dr. Ivla Griffith. Before I even went back to Ghana, after he brought me on board to revamp to help or to lead the revamping of the Faculty of Engineering and Technology before forced oil. And one of the things we did, even though with the very limited resources, we set up that petroleum engineering department and piggybacked on the programs at the UWI and the University of Trinidad and Tobago. We had several meetings with them. We established the program, even the course content. And of course, when we in 2020, when we were trying to get funding, there wasn't, the budget in 2020, there wasn't any budget because we were only because of the election and all kinds of stuff. So now they apparently, and congratulations to Vice Chancellor Pomona Mohammed. I'm glad that at least this is the first program that I see that they continued, and maybe it's because of Pomona, because they got rid of everything that the PNC had in place. As a matter of fact, there wasn't any word on this program. I've even talked about it publicly, just disappeared. I thought they just abandoned it. So I want to give some kudos to Pomona Mohammed and the folks for, at carrying out this program, which was developed under the coalition. Not that I want to take credit for the coalition. And Dr. Griffith, by the way. But I just wanted to let it be out there because I know what they're gonna do. They're gonna jump out there, which is exactly what Mr. Nandalal did here in a recent interview with NCN. He just went after the opposition, and everything that is currently there, he is saying that they put it in when they have removed a bunch of guardrails that we had in the environmental permits, for example, and the guy was either he's totally ignorant or he didn't read the contract, he didn't read the permits to say the things that he's saying. For example, could you imagine this man is saying that there was no flaring regulations in the permit? It says there, I think it was the second clause, flaring is strictly prohibited. We shut down Exxon when the equipment wasn't working. When they got into office, they removed it and add this paltry fine. And it's a lot of similar. This, you know what this man said, Dr. Hines? This here is a doozy. Dr. Hines, this whole parent company guarantee, which is what, not that I want to take credit for it, but I was the one who threatened them and say, you will not produce a barrel of oil until I get that parent company guarantee in the Lisa 2 permit, because the Lisa 1 permit was already signed and sealed and delivered before I arrived. We put it into that permit. This man is saying that not a dollar existing in the permit that we signed off. There was no parent company guarantee. This parent company guarantee came up after they come on board. And still, but he sounds so stupid, Dr. Hines. If it came during their time, why the hell are they fighting against it now? So he doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So he just lying through his teeth and his bare face, and I'm not gonna let it go because the public will hear some more from me about this. He's not gonna get away with it just getting up on television and lying like this.
He's not going to get away. As we come to the end of our program tonight, tomorrow night we're going to start a little bit early. We'll start at 6:30 tomorrow because I have another engagement later on in the evening. So we'll start tomorrow at 6:30 instead of 7 o'clock Guyana time, Eastern time. So you want to note that. Dr. Adams, as we close out, your thoughts on the court's ruling on the teachers' strike.
It's a landmark case, but I'm still keeping my fingers crossed. I have no doubt because they're going to take it to the CCJ, and all of my doubts were in the Guyana court system, but now at least what our court system is showing us, Dr. Hines, especially the ruling by Judge Kissoon, in the parent company guarantee and in the teachers, and then it went to the high court. So I know these guys, because it's not their money being spent to take it forward to the CCJ, they're going to take it because it's the taxpayers' dollars. So it doesn't matter to them. So they're going to take it there for whatever purpose, and they're looking in the eyes of every single taxpayer, every single member of this community. They ought to be making this a real a metric as to how to view this government and hold them accountable for the next election. How could you have a government who's going against its own people, Black, Indian, Amerindian, Portuguese, white? They're going against their own people's interest. There's no question about that. And so I'm glad in the case of the teachers strike, it's another victory, and I know that we've got one more lap to go, and I expect that this lap would be much easier because here we've got in the CCJ, they are neutral parties, and so I'm expecting this year is a landmark victory, and but you got to watch them, Dr. Hines. You know what they're doing? You know what they're doing because they lost this case on the parent company guarantee? What they're doing now, they want to legislate it away, the ruling by Judge Kissoon. They suddenly now the same Nandalal, and then they're coming up and Bar Jagdeo, he talked about it. So their new line is this oil spill legislation. So if an oil spill legislation comes through Parliament and they're going to win that by that one majority vote, that becomes the law, which takes prominent over Judge Kissoon's ruling.
Yeah.
So that's their new chicanery. That's so you gotta watch them. I never expected that, but this is their new move, and so that's what they're doing. That's what they're doing. playing with people's lives and our interests and our health and our economy, but they're coming up with these devious ways of going against their own people. So I'm hoping that they can come up with anything as creative as that for the teachers.
There's nothing as creative as that to the teachers, and you're quite right. We have to keep on them all the time. We have to keep on them all the time. Dr. Adams is always.
You see, that's why that whoever with the call, whoever said again, I don't care who she is, because it's obvious that she doesn't sound if she's an objective person. But that's why they don't like us, Dr. Hine, because they don't like to hear the facts that upsets their agenda.
They don't like to hear the facts, certainly. Dr. Adams, it's always a pleasure. Always
Same here, man. Same here.
Always a pleasure. And I see you next week.
Definitely.
Dr. Vincent Adams here on a Tuesday evening. We're accustomed to him on Fridays, but we had to do some reshuffling this Friday, this week. And so we did on Tuesday this week. We continue to do what we are doing because we are called upon to do it. Somebody has to do it. And the CLR James says, there is always something to be done. It was Lenin who asked, what is to be done? There is always something to be done. And if we do not do it, somebody else would have to do it. With God's blessing and God's guidance and the guidance of our ancestors, we'll continue to do what we are doing, continue to speak truth to power, continue to speak truth to untruth, continue to speak power to the powerless, continue to create the conditions to lift our people from the pit that the PPP is pushing them into. We shall overcome as we must. We are coming up on Labor Day, the 1st of May, Workers' Day, as we said a generation ago, May Day, a Workers' Day, Namasa Day, and we must make that a reality. I'm going to see you all tomorrow. Tomorrow, join me at 6:30. We're coming on half an hour early tomorrow at 6:30. Guyana time, New York time. So please mark that on your calendar. And please do remember that we want to keep our program on air. We want to keep our program on air, and we ask that you continue to support our program. Continue to support us.
Please help keep Politics 101 on social media and broadcast television. If you are in North America, please donate via Cash App or PayPal.
If you are in Guyana and the Caribbean and don't have access to Cash App and PayPal, email your pledge to dhines6106@aol.com and we will direct you how to get your donation to us. Thank you in advance for your donation.